My name is Andreas Angelidakis. I'm an artist of Greek and Norwegian descent, but I am based in Athens, Greece. And I'm part of the Waterfronts project, and I'm working with the town of Hastings, and in collaboration, of course, with Hastings Contemporary.
And where will your work be displayed in relation to the gallery and in Hastings itself?
Yes, I mean, the Hastings Contemporary has a kind of space that was almost made for a work like this, which is kind of outdoor courtyard, right on the left side of the entrance. So it's accessible also through the building. It's connected, but also it's a part of the city. And so it will be a piece for the public to not just look at, but to also, decide to use or even rearrange.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what's it called, the work?
It's called Seawall. And I was always fascinated because I studied architecture. I was always fascinated with these concrete blocks that they put inside the water to build seawalls, sort of protective barriers or breakwaters. And I was interested in the geometry. And so these blocks are called acropods. And so I made a kind of facsimile of the acropod, like full scale, but done as a soft block. So it's a block made out of a composite foam and then covered with inkjet printed vinyl upholstery. So it's a bit like an urban furniture almost, or outdoor furniture, let's say. But it looks heavy and concrete, and then it's like lightweight relatively and soft. So people can use it to sit on, and they sort of construct their own seawall. Because what I'm kind of doing is, in a way, querying this idea of the, building a wall that to protect us, let's say, from the sea and the waves. And then we know that probably in the future, like the sea level will rise. And so this wall would be underwater. So in case my wall would be like float up with the rest of the thing, and then people can just sit on it and float away. It's a bit like, let's say, political, but also fun piece.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that seems to be something, a kind of motif, if you like, that runs through your practice. Maybe we can talk a bit about that in a minute. But I was just interested in the fact that you said you'd been interested in these concrete structures for a while. So it was perhaps when I invited you to think about this project and to come to Hastings, I was interested to ask what your first response was to Hastings and how you arrived at this idea. So in a way, it's a return to an idea of a kind.
Yeah, I mean, I first became interested in these in the late 90s. I was kind of contributing architecture essays to Purple Prose, which was the magazine made by this group of French curators, Olivier Zam and Hélène Flies. And so I wrote about these kind of brutalist, ready-made sculptures abandoned on the seaside, in Athens. So kind of, I thought of Hastings, and it's not only that it's a sort of beach town, and there's this kind of weird border with Brexit that you see the other side, but then we're not part of that anymore. So it's like there's a kind of invisible border in between. Even the border with migrations and all those things that mean to, like, as a Greek, I've experienced a lot of that.
Yes.
But I also thought of Hastings as a kind of, my perception was of a holiday town in winter, which has this kind of laid back attitude. And I think as a coastal town, it has a particular vibe. So I would just imagine like kids hanging out there and like listening to music, or, teenagers who want to go to the big city, but then they sort of adopt this piece, or the skaters. It was a bit also kind of a relation to the public, let's say.
How do you mean?
Like I was imagining like the teenagers climbing up on these acropods and rearranging them, whereas it wouldn't necessarily happen inside the museum so easily, their behavior.
Yeah.
So just like yeah.
Yeah, so the idea of actually making something in a public space that was very open to the public was something that appealed to you as well for this project in particular?
Yes, because these soft pieces that I make, the soft seating systems, they become the work when actually people use them. So they kind of look like a sculpture, but then the work is completed when the public decides to interact or not. So it's always a challenge for me to see if people are going to actually interact and like the work or not. So putting it out in public is a very important part of that process.
But this is the first time you've worked literally outdoors, because you've worked, I think, in a number of public places, shopping malls and those kinds of places. But this time we're actually exposing your work to
Outdoors.
the elements.
Yes, it was the first time before COVID. But then since COVID arrived, I made another piece for a museum. But also like the original one of Documenta, of the demos for Paul Preciado's Parliament of Bodies, they would take it out to the park as well on occasion. So there were nights where they just took everything out to the park and then put them back in. It's a sort of, indoors, outdoors kind of thing. But of course, this is the first public, officially, public work, also displayed as a public work, whereas the museum in Germany uses the piece also outside. But this is kind of first public commission, perhaps, in the UK.
Yes, and you had been to the UK before, but probably not to Hastings.
Well, now I've been to Hastings a few times, but also for me, this new situation of not traveling to a place and being there sort of via Spirit or Zoom, it really suits my way of working, and it's also kind of thing that I'm eager to investigate how it plays out. How our reality is going to like develop, and whatever is the future, if there's a future.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. Sorry, go on.
It's a bit of a dystopic moment because we don't know exactly, people are getting the jab, getting the vaccine, but then what does it mean exactly?
Yeah.
Will the thing go away or?
Yeah, I imagine it won't go away entirely. We may have to have these vaccines once a year for the foreseeable future. But I mean, it's interesting that we're talking about COVID, because obviously when we first started discussing this project and your first trip to Hastings, it wasn't something that was even in the back of our minds. And we had to, like most people across the world, have had to delay so many planned projects, not just in the art.
Yes. Well, this project, though, it's an outdoors project, so it's kind of perfect for COVID times. I mean, it doesn't mean that people will crowd inside the space to see it or experience all the other works as well. So I guess we're learning to love the outdoors again, and maybe public art. There will be a new future for it.
Yeah, I think the whole Waterfronts series of commissions for England's creative coast have come into a new kind of way of existing, and they have a different kind of future, one that we simply didn't imagine when we first started planning this project a few years ago. I wanted to just ask you how this project relates to your practice in general. I mean, I think we've talked about how the acropodes are not real, but that they are covered in a print that makes them look like the actual concrete acropodes that they are, although there's something funny about that. It's slightly blurry, so you get a double take going on. with that?
I mean, these kinds of works has become over the years like a central part of my work. It has a lot to do with questioning what is real or what is reality.
Mm.
And for me, I mean, it started because I began as a kind of internet architect with like virtual reality in the late 90s, like way before it was supposed to happen. But I was always interested in studying the effects of meeting people online or taking the personal out of the space, out of the physical space, and how those things affects our behavior. So this is a kind of a continuation. I mean, the concrete that looks artificial, it's based on how they make concrete in video games, that they texture map
Right.
a volume to make it look kind of real, but then it looks, this in between real and not real. So that's what I'm interested in, I guess, this kind of inhabiting this in between space.
Yeah, and with a lot of your other works, you've created almost an environment that's based on something that's familiar to us, which might be, say, the ruins of the Parthenon or something more contemporary, but always somehow temporary or contingent, would you say? Sort of, there seems to be this combination of an interest in something that we know about and a real solid building, but something that's also either in ruins or not finished, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I like ruins or unfinished things because they allow for more participation or more interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And also these soft works, what for me is interesting that there's no wrong way to place them. And however people step in and want to turn everything upside down, that's like one more version of it. So there's no like fixed image in my mind for these works. I'm always surprised by how people interact with them. So it's also like talking about what is virtual and what is real, but also the behaviors that follow these things. And then you see those behaviors in the physical space again.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you an example, like sometimes these works are in a museum lobby, and people don't know that they can move them around or rearrange them because they have the typical behavior of a museum goer. But then when they figure it out and they start playing with them, they become a bit like people who are, suddenly online, they can comment on anything and they can do stuff. And so suddenly they're doing the same thing in the museum. So it has a bit of a behavior shift.
Great. So what's your hope for the work in Hastings, the way people will respond to it?
I hope like the skaters do something with it. The kids go there and climb up, or like people like talk about it or have conversations around it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the acropod? What does it mean? Is it about the rising sea level, or is this a toy? Yeah, I'm curious. I don't have a specific, intent of how I want people to react to it, but I'm waiting to see.
But you imagine maybe they will be thinking about some of the issues that might have been in your mind when you first visited Hastings. And I think we talked about this idea of the rising sea level and how whether people are going to be able to live even in that particular place right next to the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, it could be about that, or I imagine that people even making fantasy scenarios about what these weird things are.
Yeah.
I think that's also interesting because what we see especially during this pandemic, is the urgency of other issues is played down, but then one of the main issues is people imagining reality or constructing theories about what's going on. So I'm kind of interested in that.
more than the kind of climate crisis that we're living through, I
We'll
guess.
see. You know, I notice that people's attention changes, and also our understanding of the climate crisis changing. For example, I was reading yesterday that even though, you know, everybody stopped flying and everybody stopped driving around, the sea emissions have not gone down, because all these factories have gotten, you know, COVID bonuses to keep producing or whatever help packages, and so it hasn't changed the carbon footprint. So of course that is always going to be in the next years like a urgent matter. We'll see how you know what other urgent matters we'll have. But in general, it's always interesting to have work that questions one of the subjects of the time.
Yes, exactly. I think it's going to be an interesting place for people to reflect on that and to kind of look in, you know, in surprise maybe at what they're coming across as they're walking around Hastings.
Yeah, that could be like,
And
what is
maybe,
that?
yeah, exactly. And how do we move it around? I think,
Or like somebody's driving by and they see like two kids lifting this enormous concrete thing that they don't know what it is. So it's like, what's going on there?
yeah, yeah, I think that's one of the funniest elements of it, that from a distance, it really will look like very solid concrete, heavy materials.
Yeah.
That idea of humor is something that's really important across your whole practice, would you say?
Yes, it's a kind of funereal humor,
Yes.
because of course, like the rising of the sea and the destruction of beach cities is not like a joke. So
Mm,
it's like humor, but about a kind of catastrophe. It's
yeah, it's an important thing.
dystopia humor.
Good. I don't know, do you have anything else you'd like to say about the work, or what's the most important aspect
No.
of this project for you?
I mean, it's always a challenge to find. For me, it was because it was the first kind of public commission of this scale, to find, you know, ways that I can make my work fit into the scheme of the project and what comes up. I mean, it's kind of a collaboration in a way with you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's always the most fun thing, that it's kind of a new situation. To enter in and begin to kind of negotiate, let's say.
Yeah, and often your work, when you're presenting your work, you're making a new work for a new situation. That's frequently your practice, rather than
Yeah.
existing work.
Yes.
So that's very much that kind of social engagement with either curators or even members of the community of different kinds is a really important side to what.
Yes. Yes, of course.
Because as you said earlier, you trained as an architect, but you haven't, I mean, clearly architectural space and architecture is something that's very important to you and something you know a lot about, but you move towards being a combination of things, an artist, a curator, a teacher. Do you see yourself more prominently in any of those roles?
I mean, what I knew for sure was that I was not interested in the production of buildings, because it's, you know, it's always somehow ethically tricky, and you're always working either for somebody super rich or bad. So, and in the end, it's also like I you know, I was not fascinated by that kind of job anymore. Whereas using my, let's say, toolbox that I built up by studying architecture, but also working in contemporary art, yeah, I like variety, I guess. So like, 6 months I'm doing this, and the next 6 months I'll be doing something else. I don't know if maybe I just retire in the countryside. That could be my
I
priority.
think we're all going to do that at some point, but if we have the luxury. But I think maybe being an artist allows you a lot more freedom, right? To explore
Yeah.
a whole range.
And also I approach like every project like that, like an artist with the skill set of an architect, let's say.
Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, and
Thank you.
it's a fantastic project. And thank you very much for working with us with England's Creative Coast.
That was my pleasure.